Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hello, and welcome to Author Roundup. For today's episode, we'll be talking to indie author Shaynicorn. Shaynicorn, or Shay, is a proud disabled female, millennial author, and poet. She has been writing since the early age of 10 about her anxiety, depression, and ultimate diagnosis of complex PTSD or CPTSD and fibromyalgia because of trauma and grief endured throughout her lifetime. So Shay is here with us today to talk about her book, Worthy 2.0 or 2.0, The Journey of Finding Her, a Black Ship Manifesto. So, hi, Shay. Thank you for joining us
Hi.
today.
Thank
How
you
are
so much for
you?
having me. I am good. I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing fine. So, please tell us about your debut book, Worthy 2.0. It was published just early this year, right?
Yes, it came out towards the end of February, and I gotten so many compliments on the cover, which I love. So yeah, this came out not too long ago, and this encapsulates 2.5 decades of my journaling going back to when I was a child. I
Mhm.
grew up in a pretty toxic household, and journaling was my outlet for emotional energy that I had in my body because I didn't feel like I had anyone that I could really talk to. And so a few years ago, I came up with a 4 step healing process that starts with trauma and grief and moves to recovery and resurgence. And so what I did was I went through my old journals and I put little sticky notes like, oh, this should be in the grief section. Oh, this should be in trauma. And so there's stuff in there that's completely out of order, but I wanted to do that on purpose because it's a testament to how healing is not linear. And so the
Mm.
book proceeds exactly in that manner.
So it's a very personal book for you. Got
Yes,
it.
it's literally pouring my heart and soul from the pages of many different ages into this one book.
So the inspiration for the entire book would be, of course, the events of your life and the journals. Tell us more about the journals that you found or that you've been
Sure.
keeping for 2 decades, you said, or more than 2 decades.
I think I always wanted to be an author. I think I realized at a pretty young age that it's very hard to be a successful poet and make enough money in this world. But 5 years ago, I had a few different traumatic events happen within a very short period of time, including one of my best friends passing away. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and the year after CPTSD. And I also had to cut some people out of my life that were very toxic, and that was a very hard thing to do, and there was a lot of grief around it. So that was the year I came up with the 4 step healing process. And
Mhm.
certainly I had more things to add since I didn't publish it until earlier this year. But that was really, I guess, a feeling of, gee, I really want to share some of these messages with other people because I don't want people to hurt like I hurt. And I don't want them to suffer like I suffered, which was mostly alone and feeling like I didn't have anyone to relate to or talk to. And so I reached a point of like, I really need to get this published.
Mhm. How difficult was it for you having to go through the process of going over the journals that you wrote through the years and then putting them all in this book?
It's really interesting for me to read things that I wrote when I was like 13 or 14, because when I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, that little girl, she needed someone, she needed help. And so for me, it was just surprising almost that I wrote some of the things that I did that were just like, I have no memory of doing that because I did a lot of disassociation when I was younger. But when I looked at it, I was just like, wow, that's so raw and real. I certainly didn't put everything in my journals and in this one book, but a lot of it that really resonated around those 4 themes, I picked at any age, and no matter how intense or like maybe someone feels like it's too much in the sense of talking about depression or just maybe not wanting to be alive. I felt like it was important to put that in there because I know that a lot of people struggle and they have the same thoughts. And I wanted them to see that other people have gone through that too, and that there's another side to the story that they can get to if they keep going.
Okay. And how long did it take you to complete the book?
So when I came up with that idea 5 years ago, I did start the sticky note process, but my career really took off and I was moving up the corporate ladder, if you will. And I just kind of realized the point of if I don't stop what I'm doing, and I told myself I had to get it done before my next birthday, I was like, I don't see any other way around it. So I decided to leave my corporate job last summer and really focus and get this done. So it took me, I want to say, about 4 months from like, let's say June to October to get it to the
Mhm.
final state. And then from there, we worked on an editing process. But certainly, if you think back about all those years at different ages of journals, there was some where I didn't write much at all during a year. And I
Mhm.
realize now it was because I was in such a bad place that I wasn't even letting the outlet that I used when I was younger. And so it's interesting to see, like, at one age I wrote so many things, and then the next year was very quiet. So I do believe that everything happens in the timing it's meant to. So I added quite a few pieces during that time as well to the final book that I just wrote last year.
Okay, so take us through the writing experience, the 4 months of writing the book. But if you can share to us some anecdotes, let's say, fun experiences you've had while writing the book or difficult experiences while writing the book.
Yeah, I would say, especially with the newer pieces that I wrote, it's just a different place and different person that was really telling that part of the story. And so when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I was actually overprescribed medication and I got very, very sick in 2020. And when I read the stories, like or the writing that I had during that time, which was really where I had a mindset shift to, I really need to find a way to manage my sickness better, and a lot of that was managing stress and anxiety. I was able to get to a place to really finish telling the story, if that makes sense, because I was in such a better place. I would say, as I was going through the journals, and this was in like a shoebox from like years ago, and just a stack of probably like 10 to 12 different journals. And when you open that first one, which would have been like maybe the beginning of middle school, and you see like your old handwriting, and you see
Mhm.
things, as a younger person that like really resonated during those time periods. Like I was a big Lord of the Rings fan, so I totally wrote a poem in there about Legolas. And then when I was younger, I really wanted ponies, so I wrote a like series of poems called My Pony Woes because I was 10 and I wanted a pony. And so seeing some of those things, like certainly much more lighter than the content of the beginning that's in the book, but it did take me back to a time of like trying to remember when I did write it, because when I started going down this healing journey, I realized how much of my memories I just couldn't even remember because I completely disassociated. So I was trying to remember very much those moments, and writing at school and like in safe spaces like the library and things like that. So that was nice. I would say the hardest part was realizing how much help that little girl needed. And
Mhm.
and when I think about that a lot, I just didn't feel empowered to speak up. And I've come such a long way of recognizing when I need to say something in situations. And I'm really proud of that. But what I wish the most for her was that she would have found maybe somebody else, another adult that she could have gone to and spoken to about those experiences. But because I was so scared of getting in trouble, I was afraid to say anything to anyone. So for me, why that's so important is now I think about how I can try to help other people, especially being a mentor for younger women. That's very important to me.
Okay. Without spoiling the contents of your book, I'm sure a lot of people are interested in the four-step healing process that you mentioned. Uh, Perhaps you can give us a little background about the that process.
Yeah, so something fun that I thought of was adding archetypes into each healing step. And so each archetype represents a person or someone, maybe a feeling that really was critical to that part of the process.
Mhm.
So in the first step in trauma, there's the evil queen, there's
Mhm.
the court jester, there's the narcissist. And in there, it really talks about the pain that I felt with each of those different archetypes, but they were also so important to the story. I thought that it would be helpful to have something like that because people could relate to each archetype and perhaps their personal experiences. And certainly as you go along, things get a little bit more brighter and lighter as we move into recovery and resurgence. And towards the end, I would say the archetypes that I'm like most proud of is the Phoenix. The Phoenix is very much a spirit animal for me, if you will, that represents a lot of what I'm talking about towards the end about being reborn, but also the cycle breaker. The cycle breaker archetype is the longest passage in the book. And I actually wrote it last year after I went back to my hometown area. And I would just wanted to feel what it was like in this energy. And I saw someone that did care about me, and it really like put me in this emotional place to finish that piece, which I think is like 10 to 12 pages in the book. And it's just amazing when you think about those things. So I wanted to build something in there where people could see maybe what they've gone through or mentors for them, and be able to see that they're not alone and that there are other people out there that can help them.
Okay, so that's the message you would want to share to your readers. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of healing is you do have a moment of time where you have to acknowledge it. A lot of us want to be in denial about things that have happened to us, or maybe we're just not old enough to understand yet. And unfortunately, that's a lot of how life goes. But I think for me, I just felt so alone. What I was desperately craving was somebody else that I could relate to. And I would say that the message that I would want them to take from this is there's so many people out there. And then as I call them, the black sheep in the title, the people who are outcast from their families because they wanted to stop a cycle of abuse, or they wanted behavior to stop because it was really affecting them on so many different levels as a human being. I think that society as a whole that's still not accepted in the sense of they think there's something wrong with them versus there might be something wrong with the people who raise them or the culture that's been created and how they've been, brought up. And no one seems to want to ask people those questions like, well, what on earth happened to them to make them do that versus there must be something wrong with them. And I think that's a very important message to take away is certainly there's two sides to every story. And I'm sure some people aren't going to like what I say and hear about them, but it's important that we're held accountable for our behavior. And I do believe as a society, if we did that a little bit better, maybe the world would be a little bit more kinder.
So you mentioned about some people not liking what you wrote there. How do you manage that?
Well, I was very cautious of how I proceeded with this. So certainly I'm not necessarily calling people out directly by name or anything like that. The archetypes are, fictional things that I created. And certainly I'm speaking about scenarios and situations, but it's very common, especially as someone that's been an abuse survivor, that the other party is going to react and say, those things didn't happen. There's a lot of gaslighting in those situations, unfortunately. And a lot of times they'll get very angry because they feel like, oh my gosh, I have to be accountable. And you told people about what I did. But one of my favorite quotes that I actually put in the book, and I believe it's at the beginning of the trauma section, it says that if people wanted you to write nicely about them, they would have treated you better. And so I'm very much in a place now where I feel like I want to help people call out those behaviors or get away from them in their lives so that they can live happier lives and be able to move on and try to rebuild from whatever damage occurred to them during those cycles. And that is so brave and so powerful. And so I hope that the message isn't people, and I sincerely doubt someone's going to be like, I can't believe what you said about me on page 10, but because nobody's going to want to say that publicly, right? They don't want to be like, oh, I was the narcissist she's talking about. But I would hope that it's more of a looking at themselves through a different lens or looking in the mirror a little differently, because we are responsible for how someone else feels about us. Mm-hmm. And in the cycle breaker archetype, I'm even apologizing to people because I know as I was going through this healing journey that I was toxic myself. because I learned behaviors that weren't okay, but I thought they were okay because that's what I was taught. And
Mhm.
that's a very hard thing to accept and realize and move on from and choose to do better. So, my main message would be if you feel like I'm talking about you, I hope that you can do better with the messaging that I have in here.
Yes. So the book, like you said, it's a very brave thing for you to write it. And so it's been out for a couple of months now, right? Have you had people telling you how their book how your book affected their lives, or perhaps you can share with us some reviews? It can be like a book review or something.
Yeah, I actually had two amazing things happen already. One was a lady who I don't know personally. She read the book, and in the grief section, I have a poem that I wrote for my grandmother when she passed away. And it's called Our Angel from Above. And she actually used that same passage to read at a celebration of life for their sister in law. And I thought that was just such a wonderful thing to hear that my words, and I was very young when that happened. I think I was 13 or 14, but that my words could give some comfort to a family that was going through something similar, which is very, very hard to lose someone that's important to you. So that was a nice, touching thing to hear from someone. And the other more maybe interesting one was the narcissist archetype. I'm paraphrasing things that the abusers actually said to me. And I actually had someone who was abused by the same person that I didn't know reach out to me. And we had a very vague conversation, but we also had a very validating conversation because we were treated poorly by the same person. And I think that trauma bond, if you will, that connection is just a very special one in the sense of, wow, this happened to someone else, because we know this person's going to deny everything, that we might have to say about it. But I know that her and I, like, we are safe. We're in the safe space together of we feel seen and we're not alone. And that for me was just amazing. So certainly there's some reviews online, but nothing compares to, I think, those two
Yeah.
situations for me.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So as a writer and as a poet, what advice would you give to a writer that's working or who's working on his or her first book?
So I think I grew up with a lot of perfectionism issues. I believed that if I was perfect, that maybe people would love me more. And that is not something you can do with a book. So there's actually a passage in here. It's called Perfectly Imperfect. And at the end of it, it says, I stopped writing this book before it was perfect because it just had to be perfect to me. And I think we think so much about what everybody else is going to think. And, like, certainly you want to get it edited and certainly you want it to look good, but who are you doing it for? I hope you're doing it for yourself. And you don't want to, like, kill yourself to get this one thing done off of your bucket list. And, like, it's a huge accomplishment, a great feeling, but, like, trust your gut and your instincts. And once you feel like you've done enough, you've probably done enough. And it's better to just get it going and publish it. And you can always, change it up. You can always edit in the future if you wanted to make something a little bit different. But this is the way to start the path of writing even more. You just got to get that first one out there, and then everything from there will take off.
Okay. Do you have like a routine that you follow? Perhaps you can share it with us or
So I love working with energy healers and psychics, and I know that I'm a morning person. And some of the best advice that I got from my last session was this is the first book. There's definitely a sequel, and it's pretty much almost done. But they told me, because I like to meditate in the morning, they told me that I need to journal in the morning. I need to write in the morning. And certainly you can't write every day if something's not coming to you. This is not something you force. It just flows in you, and it comes out. So I've started in the morning as I'm meditating, asking, hey, spirit guides, do I have anything I need to talk about today? And if I do, while I'm doing my morning routine, I'll go on my little notes on my iPhone and I'll start writing away. So I've gotten a little bit away from writing as much hand on paper because I've gotten into this awesome routine with notes on my phone and my MacBook. Makes it so much easier to put the final book together. But yeah, that's worked really well for me.
okay. So how often do you do that? Like, is that on a daily basis or?
Yes, I meditate every day. And if I feel like I have something to do, I'll do it on my phone. I would say the other night, because over the weekend, I was feeling a bit triggered. So late at night, I wrote something, actually wrote two poems the other night. So sometimes it's just like, am I in an emotional state? And how do I get that out? Do I need to put something down in words? And for me, that's also another thing that I do now is I have my morning routine, but then I also have, I'm feeling overwhelmed and feeling emotional. Do I need to write this out? And then I'll just go to that and I'll just, okay, how am I feeling? And it's gotten to a really interesting place, honestly, where I don't remember what I'm writing. It's like automatic writing almost. It's like, okay. And then you go back and you read your note from like a week ago and you're like, I did that.
How did you piece them all together?
That was definitely the most challenging part. So I put them all in one Word document. For
Mm-hmm.
some of it, I had to type up for the first time because we're going back to journals that were handwritten. So certainly this time around will be a lot easier because most of it's just on my phone. But I put it all in one Word document and then I started splitting it up into each section. And there was a few that I struggled with because in some of them I'm talking about all four steps, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm talking about trauma and grief. So how did I pick which spot? So I ended up just going with my gut. And I would say that was the hardest part, was like making sure I had also enough quality content in
Mm-hmm.
each step too.
Okay. So you did mention that there's going to be a sequel to Worthy 2.0. And you said it's almost finished. So what can we expect from you, like professional goals this year?
Yeah, so the next one, because it's going to be mostly from when I was an adult, I think I'm going to go with Rebirth 2.0. That's the one that's feeling good to me, but it's going to be much more focused on a different so the first book was water, the second book will be about fire. It's going to be very heavy on healing, getting any leftover energy out that I can. Again, healing's not linear, so there's still things that I'm always going to have to work on, and I know that and I accept that. And the next one's just going to be a lot more of that mature aspect of healing, because a lot of what's in here, it could have been written in my teenage years, which, I probably didn't even know anything yet, right? I was learning a lot. So that's a big goal for me. Is I'm very excited that I'm going to be at the Word on the Street Festival in Toronto later this year. And
Mhm.
so my hope is, leading up to that, I am going to build out like a request for the next book to see if maybe that can be something that happens next year. So besides that, I'm also involved in my community and looking to partner with some nonprofits to give away some of the ebook versions. So I've
Mhm.
identified 4 different ones that specialize in helping female abuse survivors.
Mhm.
And those are the ones that I would absolutely love to work with, share my story, and see what I can do to maybe help each of them in their missions.
Mhm. Okay, so I'm seeing the sequel and then more books, speaking engagements as well with the nonprofit organizations that you mentioned a while ago. Do you also plan to perhaps writing a poetry book? Because you said that you like to write poems a lot.
Yeah, I think this one, there's a lot of what I'll call like prose poetry in the first one, because some of it was just writing. That's the best way to put it. I've kind of discovered a new signature format as I started to write a lot more this year. And I think that's the next one is where I'm going to debut that. So I would say the entire book, besides maybe segues between each section, because it will have steps in this one too. It's going to be more poetry focused for sure.
Okay, so that's exciting. How about personal goals this year? Anything you can share with us?
Yeah, so I actually, one of my good friends, when the book came out, she told me she couldn't finish reading my book right now because she was triggered. And that made me really realize, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for that. I need to make sure that I'm prepared to have conversations with people who read my book if that's necessary. So that actually made me interested in becoming a master life coach and getting certified, getting trauma informed certified for coaching and mindfulness certified. So what I'm working on right now actually is I'm building out inner child class to help
Mhm.
people with kind of what I've learned with my journey. And so I'm really excited about that. I'm going to do like a smaller group at first, but and certainly see what I learn and what I might need to change along the way. But I
Mhm.
think that would be a really great way, especially to partner with some of the nonprofits to build something like that that's tangible and that they can take away with them. I think that'd be really cool.
Yes, that's amazing to be able to touch the lives of, other people who went through the same things that you had to go through. That's a very wonderful experience. So, do you have a final message for our viewers and our listeners?
I would just say I'm so excited that I've been able to share my story already with so many people. And I certainly hope as I continue on this book journey that I'll come across more people that just feel seen. Really, that would be my main personal like achievement is like helping people feel seen and that they're not so alone. And I certainly invite you to come see me in Toronto when I go to the festival.
Mhm.
I'm really excited about that. I'll have some other events leading up to it as well. But I hear that's the largest book festival in Toronto, so
Mhm.
that's going to be quite the event. So I'm excited.
Yes. Can you also invite them to check out your website and follow you in your socials?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is shaynicorn.com, which should be super easy. I also have a TikTok that's at Shaynicorn. I have an Instagram that's at Shaynicorn underscore author. And I also have a Facebook page that you can look up. So I would love to connect with you all, and I look forward to talking with them.
Please invite them as well to purchase a copy of your book.
Yeah, and Worthy 2.0 is available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Noble. And when I Googled it, I couldn't believe all the other retailers that's available across the globe. There's some in
Mm,
Australia and other
yes.
places in Canada. But certainly, I hope that you will purchase a copy. And I look forward to seeing your reviews soon.
And then, yes, so it's available as a paperback, hardback, and an ebook. So for those who prefer the printed copies, they can get a paperback or a hardcover. And to those who prefer the soft copies or the electronic copies, then it's available as an ebook as well, right? And
Yeah.
aside from Amazon and Barnes and Noble, Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, it's also available in the online bookstore, Balboa Press. Yes. Okay,
Yes.
so thank you so much, Shay, for the very insightful conversation about your book. I hope we have more time, but perhaps we can continue this conversation on your next book once you've already finished it and it's already published. So to all our viewers and our listeners, to everyone who joined us today, thank you and see you again on the next episode of the Author Roundup.